What wide receiver would make the most sense for the Cowboys in round one? And what position is the deepest in this year's draft? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on. Locked on.
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. We're getting closer and closer to this thing. I'm excited to continue to kind of pound away at these different prospects and figure out who might be the best fit.
We got a lot of questions about wide receivers today in the first round. So it sounds like people are starting to zero in on the Cowboys maybe drafting a receiver at number 24. So I want to go with this question first. This one from Travis. Is investing our first round pick in a wide receiver a good allocation of resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think wide receiver is a position that you don't really have to worry about spending a first round pick because you're losing the opportunity cost of getting a cheap player at a position that is usually expensive. I think wide receiver certainly fits the bill there. If anything, I think guard is more likely the position that you would be concerned about the value that it's really just the opportunity cost to have a cheap player that's playing at a starter level for 5 years at the position. And with guard, it's like that's a relatively cheap position anyway. So you're not really getting the same opportunity cost as opposed to left tackle, wide receiver, quarterback, cornerback, that sort of thing. So I think using wide receiver, look, if the question is more, do the Cowboys need a wide receiver? Then as relative to the offensive line,
that's different.
I think so. I think that's a different question. I still think the answer is yes. I mean, I think that they need at least one more guy that they're going to add that has some top end talent. I think you can get a guy who can come in and play a role for you at wide receiver later in the draft if you want. In fact, maybe you'll even double dip later and get one of those guys as well. But I think if you're looking for someone who can come in and give you contributing snaps at the wide receiver position, who could be who could make an impact at the position, I think that's something that you're likely going to need to draft on day one, day two to get the kind of impact you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think you could even find there's free agent receivers out there if you need somebody just to get you through the first 8 weeks of the season or whatever, right? But you're not going to find guys that have high-end ceilings. You're not going to find number one receivers in free agency. Yeah. And in fact, you're probably not even going to find a wide receiver too at this stage in free agency, right? And I just think with a wide receiver being a booming market right now, like if you're halfway competent and you're going to get $18 million a year, I think it makes a lot of sense to draft a receiver in round one, especially when you get that 5th-year option, right? That's huge.
Yeah. And that's the kind of the whole thing, right? Is that, if anything, the argument is being made constantly about other positions where you just don't have these high priced players, right? So how much are you really saving by having a guard on a rookie contract? I mean, you're saving some, but it's nothing compared to what you are saving when you have a top end wide receiver on a rookie contract or top end quarterback. So I think that's the big difference.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's a really good chance that an offensive lineman is the best player on the board when the Cowboys get up to 24.
Yeah.
But it might make financial sense to draft a receiver at 24. Plus, we talked about the depth of this class. There's not a lot of receivers that you love on day 2 this year. But there might be a couple offensive linemen that you like quite a bit, or at least feel pretty good about if you need them to play right away. I think that's why maybe the Cowboys are leaning wide receiver in round 1.
Yeah, I see a lot of people kind of on Twitter that kind of poo-pooing the idea of draft sequencing and that it's not, a good strategy. And And the reference I keep seeing is the Taco Charlton thing, but that doesn't quite apply because TJ Watt was available when Taco Charlton was available.
You could have nailed
So
that draft if you just take the better player at the same position.
the sequencing would have been worked perfectly if you had just drafted the right guy that was available when you had him. So I'm a big believer in kind of doing kind of what we did, right? Going through the draft, mock drafting, figuring out where the soft spots are relative to what your needs are. And then, that's why it's like the idea of drafting for need being like something that you can't do is just so silly. It's not about like ham fisting your pick at a certain spot to fit your need. It's about finding the spots where the value meets your need and then drafting them in an appropriate round and not getting so concerned about individual players that, if you like several of them, right? So I think for the Cowboys, you're right. We've, early on, we've talked about this, how there was this kind of, like I keep referring to this nexus of need and value at guard at 24. However, when you take a longer view, when you pull back and look at the 10,000 foot view, there does seem to be some sense in trying to figure out a way to get like either a wide receiver or something in 24 and then waiting on guard simply because your opportunity to get the kind of wide receiver that you need is better, obviously, at 24, then it drops precipitously versus guard at 56 and anything after that.
We're going to talk about which receivers fit the best of the Cowboys in just a second, but I want to get to another question from somebody who really likes a day two receiver. This one from Mike. He wants to know, at pick 56, what kind of impact could Calvin Austin have on this offense? So this is admittedly one of the guys, if the Cowboys wait on receiver, that I would be interested in the second round. If you're drafting a tiny receiver, but how could he help this team in year one?
Oh, I think a guy like that could help immensely. Immediately you make him your kind of gadget guy. You certainly can draw up a ton of different stuff to try to intentionally give him the ball. Whether you want him to play in the slot as a kind of
he almost has to play in the slot, right?
Yeah, but obviously, like you could do more there. You could put him in the backfield. You could, you could move him around a little bit. He's not going to be your full time by any means outside guy. I don't even know if he could function as a Z full time, but maybe he could. So I think that you look at the guys like that who have kind of a trait, especially speed. You can find a way to fit that into your offense, to be creative, to fold him in. That's a situation where you're getting kind of a gadget player that it certainly can have an immediate impact on your team, but it's not like you're getting another top end starter wide receiver that's like your opposite of CeeDee Lamb or anything like that. I think that, the idea is that this is a guy who year one, you're looking at, kind of playing a gadget role, scheming him some touches, trying to get the ball to him on the move, as opposed to just being able to kind of sub him in anywhere and like use him as part of a normal wide receiver rotation.
Yeah, I actually like Austin quite a bit with a healthy Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb, right? Because those are your two outside receivers. You bring in Austin as the slot. You let Noah Brown or whoever else is that blocking receiver kind of handle everything else. And this is a guy that you just try to get on the field 20, 25 snaps a game and get the ball in his hands because he's really, really quick and he's really, really fast. I think 56 is probably the right spot to draft him. He's certainly not going to get to you in the third round, and he might not even get to you at 56 because he's just so explosive.
Yeah, it feels like that's kind of right around where his range is. So I think that is something that the Cowboys should be considering.
I will say this. With these guys, that happens every single year. I agree. I think this is where his range should be. But speed receivers always go about 15, 20 spots higher than they should at least, right? I'm thinking even somebody like Rondale Moore went way higher than he probably should have last year, right? He was in the 40s or something like that. And you're talking about another 5'7" receiver. McCool Hardman went in the second round despite playing wide receiver 1 year. Would not shock me at all if he goes like 42 in this draft.
Yeah, for me, 56 is with the 15 spot bump. I see this guy as a third rounder, So I think 56 is reasonable, but if he goes higher than that, like you said, I wouldn't be totally surprised because it's really difficult to kind of gauge how each team is valuing these types of players.
Yep. Yep. All right, let's take one quick break and then we'll come back talking more about receivers. But I want to tell you guys about Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including the latest Masters Championship odds. I bet on Brooks Koepka today to finish inside the top 10. It's my favorite bet. I also rooted for Tiger, but I couldn't bet on him. They have all odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Landon. Somebody wants to know, can you guys rank the top 5 receivers in terms of fit with the Cowboys? Not necessarily who you think are the best players, but the receivers that you think fit the best.
Okay, so all right, well, let's get the top 5 just in a group already.
So,
right? So
here's the names according to the consensus board right
now.
It's Garrett Wilson, it's Drake London, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Treylon Burks.
Okay, so as far as for like specifically what the Cowboys are needing, right? I honestly don't know that there's too much change, right? Because I feel like the Cowboys could use any one of these types of players, right? But sure. I would say like I've said before, I would rank it. I think Williams is a guy that if he fell to the Cowboys would be a great fit for what they're looking for. I think he would be a true Z. I think he would be the kind of guy that would take the top off. So I would go probably Williams, Olave, Burke, London, Wilson. No, Wilson, London, maybe.
I probably would go. So this is funny. This is why it's a good exercise. I would probably go Wilson, Olave, Williams, Burks, London. And London might be my favorite receiver of the class. I'm just not sure that's the best fit for what the Cowboys want right now because they kind of already have 3 outside receivers that don't really stretch the field. I mean, Gallup can a little bit, but they need somebody with a little bit more quickness and speed. And it's just not necessarily London's game. I like Wilson quite a bit because he can make plays after the catch. He's not going to be there. You don't need to worry about that one.
Nope.
It just comes down to me. The big discussion is Olave versus Burks. I think Olave is way safer. I think he's a better fit with Dak. I think he's a better fit, with CD and Gallup. But I can understand the appeal for Burks. If you want somebody that you can throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage and still get 17 yards, that's Treylon Burks. It's a fascinating class.
It really is. It's so fascinating because really more so than I feel like we've seen in a long time, there are wide receivers of every flavor, right? Like all and at the top too, like you can just 1 through 5, they're all kind of just slightly different. And I think that kind of lack of duplicate skill set, I guess is the best way to put it, is going to make this whole first round very interesting because I think all these teams are going to view these players very similarly, very differently in the way that you and I do, right? Like in the sense that they'll all view each of them through their own lens of what their needs are, what they're looking for, what their archetypes are. And frankly, I think what it's going to mean is that the boards are going to be crazy different. And some of these guys may get drafted artificially high or very artificially low because like London, for instance, right? That body type is kind of a old school sort of body type, right? So a lot of teams,
right?
Yeah, a lot of teams may look at that situation and say, well, we're not interested in that. So they'll put him further down the board. And that disparity may reflect itself if that is happening at the top of the board, right? Yep. On the flip side of that, I just listened to a fantastic podcast on The Athletic last night that was talking about the return of Coryell offenses and because of the rise of cover 2 defenses in football. And that's going to mean that we're going to see more of these kind of big-bodied X receivers playing. Mm-hmm. So another team may look at him and view him as exactly what they want, their number 1 receiver. So my point being, all these teams are going to view this through their own lenses. It's going to make the order all over the place. That's why I think the Cowboys really are doing the due diligence on these guys because all of that volatility in these evaluations, more so at the wide receiver position, maybe than anywhere else, is going to cause a lot of things that we don't expect to happen on draft day. Someone is going to fall. One of these wide receivers is not going to get taken where we think they are. And I think that is going to be because of exactly that phenomenon I'm talking about. I think there are certain guys like Olave who kind of are universal, right? Like I think anybody could use a route runner. But I think some of these other skill sets are probably like Treylon Burks, I think are probably more specific to teams that are looking for that type of player. And so that means that just less opportunity for them to get picked up at the top.
I agree. This is just a wild wide receiver class where it's all about what does your team need? Do you need speed? Do you need a guy that can win above the rim? My guess is across the league, the receiver rankings are, you might have 6 different guys as the number 1 receiver in this class, depending on the team. So we got one more wide receiver question, kind of. So he said, you guys have discussed recently that there aren't great wide receiver options after round 1 for an instant impact. It seems like wide receiver and offensive line are where we need an instant impact. Can you guys talk about the instant impact players at offensive line in rounds 2 through 4? We don't have to go through all these, but is there a couple guys that you like if the Cowboys do wait on offensive line, that they could grab?
I just think that there's a lot of these guys that are being trying to be artificially pushed up into the first round that may end up falling, whether that's someone like
Linderbaum.
Well, Linderbaum is certainly one of those guys. I mean, look, here's the real problem with the center class in general is that this class is got the most undersized centers I've ever seen. Like by most, I mean numerous. Like there's a lot of these guys. So and that makes up a chunk of the kind of first and second day potential offensive linemen that are going to be drafted. There isn't a ton of true guard types that are like going to be available kind of around there. I mean, I think we talked about people like Cole Strange and I think some of these other guys, but I mean, most of them are kind of, undersized interior folks at best. So I would not be surprised if there was a guy like, who's the kid from Tulsa? I want to say Trey Smith, but I don't
Tyler Smith.
Tyler Smith, right? Tyler Smith. This guy like that, I literally read a report, I think from Tony Pauline yesterday, saying that he could go 26 to the Titans. But I would not at all be surprised if a guy like that fell, or someone of that ilk kind of fell.
That's where he should be, is in the second or third round. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, I think someone like that. Well, I get the Smith thing if the idea is that, okay, I could draft this guy, put him inside a guard until he learns tackle. I'm on board with that. I could get that, not for first round, not like I'm not endorsing him for.
You're saying like, if you're drafted in the 40s or 50s,
I'd love to take him at 56 and do exactly that, because I think that I'm watching the tape. He certainly has holding issues. There's no way around that, but that's technique based. I think that you can fix that relatively easily. I don't think that that's a bad habits thing. I think it's a trusting your technique thing, and that's something that can be imminently fixable if there's a willingness there. So I think it's guys like that you need to look out for, that there are tackles that are fallen for one reason or another. I don't know that there's a lot of kind of pure interior offensive lineman type that are like certainly worth it. The Boston College kid, but he's more of a center too, like Lindstrom, I think it is.
Alex Lindstrom. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there are some guys there that I've seen that I've liked, but I don't know that it's like a lot better than the wide receiver position. I think it's probably similar as far as like at 56 where you're picking, how you feel about those interior.
All right. So I got a few. Let's start with the guys that will probably be picked around where the Cowboys are going to be drafting. I like Darian Kennard a lot from Kentucky. Like, that's one of my favorite guys. If they draft an offensive lineman in the second round, I like him. He's only played right tackle at Kentucky, but his tape is really good. Now, he'd be moving probably to left guard. You're getting a 340-pound guard that's a little bit sloppy, but he just doesn't get beat very often. I saw a stat from Pro Football Focus where over the last 5 games in the SEC, he gave up 1 pressure. Like
Mhm.
he just gets it done. So I like him quite a bit. I'm also okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but I don't love the depth in this class in general. You get to day 3. I did. Let me back up. I did a mock draft for the game day. I did all 7 rounds, picked out every single pick, and I was struggling to find guys that I think were like NFL quality players in round 4. It's just not a very deep class. So if the Cowboys can trade their 4th round pick or even the 3rd round pick and move from, let's say, 56 up to 35 and draft an offensive lineman that you like, I would rather do that. I think there's a chance Landon, like one of Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green, falls to the top of the 2nd round. Maybe you go do that. I like Bernard Ryman a lot from Central Michigan. He's probably a tackle in the NFL, but I think he could play
Yeah.
guard early on.
He could probably play guard early on.
Go
Yeah.
trade for Ryman if you get your receiver. Like just come out of this draft with a wide receiver and a guard that you feel really good about, and we'll be fine.
My thought process is that I do think the draft is deep, but I don't think it's deep in the sense that like we would normally say a draft is deep. I think what happened is that because of the COVID situation, because of what it caused and all the odd players coming out and players returning, you have a lot of these 26-year-old guys coming out, 25-year-olds. I don't think, when we think of deep, I think we think a lot of 1st round players and then a good chunk of 2nd round players. I think where this is deep is that the 4th round extends the bottom of the 4th round, the 5th round extends all the way to the end of the draft, right? Like there aren't any true, like I think you'll get to the 7th round and then there'll be guys that people had on their fourth round boards or graded as 4th round players. That's where I think the depth is in just sheer volume of NFL eligible players, I guess, players that could actually play some role in the NFL. But I agree, the talent at the top doesn't extend anymore. In fact, if anything, it's weak at the top, it's shallow at the top, and then it seems like the 4th round will last forever. So I agree. If you feel like your guy is reachable with one of these picks, that you need wide receiver and guard. Everything outside of that is kind of gravy, I would not be shocked or I wouldn't be upset if they made a small trade to go get the guy they want. I also agree that Kennard is that guy that you target at 56. My concern is that, half the time he's there, half the time he's not there.
I know.
And on top of that, he's a right tackle moving to left guard. It's like a change of sides and position when you've only ever played one spot. That kind of concerns me a lot. Like some of the other guys that people are plugging in there like Parham and stuff. And Parham's he's a center only, So
he's
unless
285 pounds.
If he's a center, he may just be a fullback in this offense. I think, the problem we are going to run into is there's going to be guys who are offensive linemen that are worthy of taking at 56, but are they going to be immediate solutions for your left guard situation? And I'm not poo-pooing Kennard because I think that he's one of those guys that I do believe probably has the best chance. But even him, it's not a perfect,
No, it's not somebody already knowing the position. Yeah, it's a projection, right? I mean, you're just at that point, you're taking somebody who has a lot of SEC production and projecting that he'll be able to figure it out. But I agree. It's scary.
The best, if you're trying to get the best talent at those two positions, find a trade partner and go trade for a wide receiver and then draft Zion Johnson. Because here's the thing. I feel confident we can get to 24 and pick a good guard. I feel like Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson will be there.
One of those guys is going to be there.
And if they're not, another offensive lineman that is also very good will be there because someone picked Zion Johnson or Green and that pushed them down. And if you can do that and then figure out a trade for a wide receiver that you like, that may be the best of both worlds that you're getting there.
I agree. All right, one more quick break to tell you guys about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock up on all of the parts you need. Rock Auto has everything from engine control modules to brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, couple more questions. This one from Brett. How are we feeling about the backup quarterback situation in Dallas?
I don't feel like we haven't talked about it, very much, and I don't really feel like there's a huge push to feel like we need to address it at this point. I liked what we saw from Cooper Rush last year. I mean, he came in and won himself a game in Minnesota, and I think that showed you kind of what you're hoping to get out of the backup quarterback. He was a backup quarterback before, so if anything, I actually feel kind of confident going into next year that you don't necessarily need to do anything there. And
let's not forget about Will Grier too on the roster.
Yeah, hey, come on, he's on the come, and he's going to be pushing that backup quarterback spot. I mean, look, I just think Cooper Rush provides a floor for you. If Grier wants to come in here and improve on that, that's great. Will they draft another quarterback late in the draft? Maybe. But
Wouldn't be opposed to it. If you take a quarterback in the 5th round that you like with some tools and you put him on the practice squad, why not?
Absolutely. But I think at this point, I'm not terribly concerned about it because I feel like you've got a good in-house solution. And that's, one thing that you feel like you have some knowledge about.
All right, let's get to a couple more questions. This one from Josh. What is the deepest roster spot on the Cowboys right now heading into the draft? So basically a spot they won't draft.
Cornerback?
Yeah. Corner. I mean, they'll add somebody on day 3 or a couple guys in UDFAs that have really, really long arms that are really, really tall, but they're probably not going to draft anybody high.
Probably not. Yeah. I mean, unless there's another trade coming, right? Just because there's just a lot of numbers.
Yeah. I did a little research. I'll tweet out the link, but there's like 7 or 8 corners that are like day 3 guys that hit everything that Dan Quinn wants in a corner. I would almost be shocked if they don't grab one or two of those guys. They're just going to throw darts at long athletic corners every single year.
Because of, like we said, the depth of the back end of this draft, a lot of those guys might end up being pushed out of the back end of the draft, and then you get them as
surprising at all.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised at all. All right, one more quick question. People want to know: is there any position that you think is worth waiting on past day 2 of the draft? So, where can you find good players on day 3 of this draft?
Well, for what you're looking for.
For what you're looking
for, I think you can get a linebacker that past day 3 because I think that there is just a lot of those guys, right?
You can find a number 3 or number 4 linebacker on day 3. Absolutely.
Yeah, especially a guy that could be like a special teams guy. Look, I mean, JoJo Dorman, my guy from Nebraska, is kind of that weird hybrid quarterback linebacker. He'd be a great special teams player.
Can I make a prediction on him right now?
Okay,
he's going to be a New England Patriot. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, you're right. He probably will be. Or a Pittsburgh Steeler, right?
I hope not.
Yeah, I think linebacker's a spot that will stretch a little bit.
Running back.
Yeah, certainly running back. I mean, especially for what you're looking for now, like you're looking for some competition for that 3rd running back spot. I think you can definitely find guys further down the roster further down in the draft that can come in and give you some quality snaps there. I think tight end at this point, I mean, there's just not a lot of them at the top. So I think a lot of them are going to end up, some will get artificially pushed up, and then the rest will kind of sit at the back end of the draft. And I think that there will be some guys that you could probably draft in the 4th or 5th round that will be, worthy of your time, that can come in and contribute as backup tight ends or
like Charlie Kohler, who I like a lot. Like I would not be surprised at all if he's sitting there in the 4th round and some team drafts him and he's starting in 2023.
Is Rucker, like, what's his injury situation? Is that going to drive him to go down to the 4th round? You could see someone like him coming in as a kind of a 4th or 5th round guy that is a blocking tight end. I
heard Broadus today say a 2nd round pick, and I just don't see that. I don't see him being a 2nd round.
Yeah, if that seems very rich for his skill set, and especially since he's injured. But I think. There's guys, even if he does, there's still lots of these other guys like Cal Calcetta from SMU. That
Isaiah Likely is another one.
Yes, it's not a great.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you need a number 2 tight end, you can find that guy early 4th, maybe even 5th round.
It's not a great tight end 1 class, but there's tons of tight end 2s in the back end of this draft that you can find.
trying to think if there's any other positions. I kind of like the day 3 edges. Like if you just need a guy to come
Yeah.
in and be like your 4th edge rusher or just give you some rotational snaps. Like one of the guys I like is Dominique Robinson from Miami of Ohio. I like D'Angelo Malone a little bit from Western Kentucky, but those are guys that come in and are part of a rotation as a rookie and maybe develop into your 3rd defensive end.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that is because there is a very good edge class. It doesn't have the kind of Myles Garrett type, unless you view Aiden Hutchinson that way. But it's got some top end guys, top of the near the top of the first round guys, some middle of the first round, some second round guys, and all of those guys are pushing down the kind of guys who normally in other years where the edge class is not very deep, that would normally be artificially pushed up, right? So
Yeah.
especially the smaller school guys, you're going to get an opportunity. Someone like Cam Thomas, right? If you look at his testing profile, I think that normally you would see a guy like that potentially be sneaking into the back end of the first round because of the position and because of his athleticism. Those guys are going in the second round this year, and I think that it will in turn push down more folks that you could be available in the 3rd and 4th, 5th rounds.
Is there any position like when you're doing these mock draft simulators where you just get to day 3 and you just don't like any of the names you see? Because for me, it's defensive tackle. Once I get to day 3, it's like I'm good. I don't love it.
I mean, honestly, like even the guys that I don't necessarily love, they're gone before day 3 at defensive tackle, just because there aren't a ton. Like I think about the Phyllis from Alabama, like he's just
Matthias,
a big nose
yeah.
tackle. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the last defensive tackle that I consistently seeing taken kind of later in the round is my guy from UCLA, Double-O.
Yeah.
And I think he's usually like a 4th round guy. And admittedly, this is a nose tackle only type player.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's the kind of skill sets that you're going to get, kind of later on in the draft at this point.
I'll be honest. I think there's 6 defensive tackles in this class that are worth top 125 picks, and they probably all will be top 50 picks.
I haven't watched that Stanford kid yet, but yeah, outside of that, I could name on one hand like how many defensive tackles are worth a damn, really, right?
Jordan Davis, Wyatt, Logan Hall, who's really more of like a tweener.
I think he's a 3 technique, so I'm counting him.
Okay.
Yeah, Travis Jones,
Perrion Winfrey, Matt Matthias from Alabama, and that's it. I mean, like that drops off in a big way after that.
Yeah, and so and even Hall, we're kind of pushing into that. I mean, that he wants to play 3 technique from what I've heard, but even then, like I think it's going to need to be pretty scheme specific if you're having him as your starting 3 technique. There just isn't a ton of these guys. And what's interesting too is that, kind of going back to what I was just talking about, the Athletic podcast, they constantly are talking about how there's a change and shift in how they're using defensive linemen. So maybe you're going to see more of these 5 techniques kind of paired with these 2 high defenses that is more common nowadays.
Should also mention to Marvin Leal, who the Cowboys are bringing in for a 30 visit. I don't really know what position he is in the NFL.
What position does that dude play?
Tyrone Crawford. The Tyrone Crawford position is the position he plays, where depending on who's out this week is where you're going to play. I mean, that's basically it. But yeah, defensive tackle is not a position that stretches very far in this draft. All right, it's a good show. We got through more questions than we normally do. Normally we only get through about 2. So we'll try to continue to do more of these Twitter Tuesdays, maybe a couple more Twitter Thursdays ahead of the NFL draft. Follow the show on YouTube, Locked On Cowboys. You can follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Bye, everybody.